This video is about eukaryotes. And eukaryotes are organisms whose cells have nuclei. There's a nucleus in the cells of eukaryotes. All cells are either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, and eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus. And a nucleus is just a membrane that surrounds the cell's DNA. In these two images, the purple oval on the right represents a nucleus surrounding the DNA. The DNA is represented in red. Eukaryotic cells are usually much larger than prokaryotes. The image on the right represents a eukaryotic cell, and the image on the left represents a prokaryote. Humans are covered in bacteria. There's something like 10 times as many bacterial cells in a human body as there are human cells. And if that's true, why don't we look like giant blobs of bacteria if there are so many more bacterial cells than human cells? And the reason is human cells are much larger than bacterial cells because human cells are eukaryotic, whereas bacterial cells are prokaryotic. Eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles. This is one of the aspects of eukaryotic cells that distinguishes them from prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells have a greater variety of organelles than prokaryotic cells, and the organelles in eukaryotic cells are bigger than the organelles in prokaryotic cells. And this is illustrated in these two images. The image on the left is a prokaryote. The image on the right is a eukaryotic cell. And you can see there's more organelles and they're larger. And it's not obvious in this image, but those larger organelles are membrane bound. One of the organelles that's found in the cells of eukaryotic organisms is the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum. And what the endoplasmic reticulum does, among other things, is it assembles lipids for the cell membrane. That's one of its functions. And the endoplasmic reticulum is often called the ER. When it's written, it's often written out as the ER. And there's two kinds of ER, or endoplasmic reticulum. There's rough ER and there's smooth ER. The rough ER is covered in ribosomes. But smooth ER is not covered in ribosomes. I'm going to attempt to point these out to you here. This red oval surrounding the nucleus, that's the rough ER. And you can see those little blue dots, those are the ribosomes. So there's the rough ER covered in ribosomes. And over here, this is our smooth ER. You can see there's no ribosomes on it. It's helpful to know the word modify. To modify something is to slightly change it. For example, the teacher modified the test by rewording some questions. In that example, the teacher is simply changing the test a little bit. They're not totally changing it. And some related words are modification or modified. Those words are related to modify. One of the organelles that's found in the cells of eukaryotic organisms is the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus attaches carbohydrates and lipids to proteins. In other words, it modifies proteins. Some of these modifications function as address labels. It says where the protein needs to be sent. And from the Golgi apparatus, a protein is then sent to its destination. And some proteins are actually sent outside of the cell. They're produced inside the cell, but they're made for a function outside of the cell, and so they're sent somewhere else. And the Golgi apparatus helps determine where that protein is sent. Another organelle found in eukaryotic cells is mitochondria. And mitochondria power the cell. Mitochondria use glucose to produce ATP, And ATP is what cells use for energy. And if you're going to talk about only one of them, you'd say mitochondrion. So the singular version is mitochondrion. If you're talking about many, you'd say mitochondria. Biologists divide up living things into 6 kingdoms. And all prokaryotes are found in the kingdoms Eubacteria and Archaebacteria. The other 4 kingdoms are protists, fungi, plants, and animals. And all protists, fungi, plants, and animals are eukaryotes. The cells of these organisms contain nuclei. Some eukaryotes are unicellular, and some eukaryotes are multicellular, so they can be either. Some eukaryotes reproduce sexually, and other eukaryotes reproduce asexually. So we find sexual or asexual reproduction among eukaryotes. And some eukaryotes have cell walls, and other eukaryotes do not have cell walls. Let's look at a few MCAS questions. Which of the following statements best describes this organism? A, the organism is eukaryotic because it has a plasma membrane. B, the organism is prokaryotic because it can reproduce asexually. C, the organism is prokaryotic because it can synthesize its own food. Or D, the organism is eukaryotic because it has membrane-bound organelles. And the answer is D. And among the reasons is this is the nucleus. And these are the other membrane-bound organelles. These smaller structures are the ribosomes. So if it was a prokaryotic organism, those are the only organelles that you would be able to see. The diagram below represents a single-celled organism. Which labeled part identifies this single-celled organism as eukaryotic? A, cell membrane, B, cytoplasm, C, flagellum, or D, nucleus? And the answer is D, the nucleus. Eukaryotic organisms are organisms whose cells contain a nucleus. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes can have all these other things. Of course, all cells have a cell membrane and cytoplasm. And flagella are more common among prokaryotes, but eukaryotes can also have a flagellum. And of course, that's demonstrated in this diagram. This is a eukaryotic organism that has a flagellum. A student views cells from several different prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms under a high-powered microscope. Which of the following statements describes how the prokaryotic cells appear different from the eukaryotic cells? A, the prokaryotic cells are much larger. B, the prokaryotic cells do not have nuclei. C, the prokaryotic cells have mitochondria. Or D, the prokaryotic cells have a less distinct shape. The answer is B, the prokaryotic cells do not have nuclei. That's what distinguishes prokaryotic cells from eukaryotic cells. This video was about eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are organisms whose cells contain a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. And 3 examples of organelles found in the cells of eukaryotic organisms are the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, and mitochondria. And we noted that there are 2 types of endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. There's the rough ER, and there's the smooth ER. And the rough ER is covered in ribosomes. Eukaryotes belong to 4 of the 6 kingdoms of life. Protists, fungi, plants, and animals are all eukaryotes.